Hey everybody, John Gums going live, Dakota Grappler live on a Tuesday special night. We're usually on Wednesdays and some Sundays, but we have a special guest, our podcast extraordinaire, Jason Bryant, coming on. You guys have probably seen him, Matt Talk, going back for years. I've seen him around the scene for about ever. I think he's still involved with National Wrestling Coaches Media Association, something like that.
Usually anything involving national and wrestling I'm kind of involved with, whether it be the Coaches Association or the Media Association. Yeah, I'm still involved with all that.
And you have the classic radio voice, that nice deep, low tone. I'm looking forward to speaking with you about wrestling, some of the stuff you saw this last week in the NCAAs. We're always excited to get going. On my right over here, we got Bill Horton. He's my right-hand man. He's my college expert. He by far knows as much college wrestling as anybody I know. And so he's awesome, and we're looking forward to it. So right away, I'm just going to ask you your first question and get you going right away, Jason. Actually, let's have you introduce yourself. Let's do that first. Introduce yourself, Jason.
Well, it's good that this is my radio voice. I have to change it because nobody.
No, I'm just kidding. No, my name's Jason Bryant. I'm a Virginia native. Originally from Newport News. Moved to this little wrestling craze town called Poquoson, spelled P-O-Q-U-O-S-O-N. Actually have a national qualifier this year at Division I from my hometown. Patrick McCormick at 125 pounds for the University of Virginia will be repping Bull Island, as we call it back home. That's where I fell in love with the sport of wrestling. It's a wrestling crazed town. His grandmother was my assistant principal in high school. Patrick's grandfather was the head of the NCAA wrestling officials for a long time, and Patrick's dad, Mike, is a top-level NCAA wrestling official. So the city is pretty much ingrained with the sport of wrestling. So I think it's 8 or 9 different times that my hometown's appeared at the tournament. But I run Matt Talk Online, which actually started out of my dorm room as a college freshman. Matt Talk, the name, was a radio show that started on an AM radio station in Hampton, Virginia when I was still in high school. And I've made the rounds. I joke that I've had more jobs in wrestling than Sammy Henson. Whether or not that's true or not, sometimes I also use Wade Chalice in place of that as well. I have a special connection to the Dakotas, 2 of them now. Of course, my first time I ever got on a plane in my life was to go to Fargo, North Dakota in 1999 for the USA Wrestling Cadet and Junior Nationals. Now it's Cadet. It's 16U is the terminology, but Cadets and Juniors, as we call it, in the Fargo Dome. So I became indoctrinated into NDSU football at an early age, before my alma mater even had football. And then, my nephew now lives in Fargo. I married into a Minnesota family, and of course, sure enough, that nephew decides to go to North Dakota State. So as I'd spent the last 22 summers going to Fargo, the greatest town in the world, in July for 8 days. I mean, I know winters up there really stink, but I get a little taste of that here in the Twin Cities. But I've been a wrestling fan for a long time. Been covering. I've wanted to be a sports broadcaster for as long as I can remember, and wrestling kind of took hold of me back when my late teens, and that's pretty much the short version of how I got into it. And what I do now, you hear me on podcasts, you hear me at the NCAA championships, the World Championships. I'm extremely fortunate to have had the opportunity to announce the Olympic Games in 2016. I am slated to do the Olympic Games again this coming summer, 2020 asterisk, because it's 2021 or they're just whatever they're doing. So I've just been the sport of wrestling's been really good to me, considering my career was really, really poor. Said wrestling hometown was pretty good when I was coming through, nationally ranked. So when you're a first-year kid coming out, putting on the shoes for the first time at age 16, you don't get a whole lot of mat time when your high school team's ranked 24th in the country, wrestling a pretty nationally competitive schedule. So I've settled into a groove that I can be around the sport of wrestling, and that doesn't have me, getting my arms ripped off as an athlete or my face beat in by kids who I would be coaching who are better than me. So I got that part where I can be around the sport and not have the battle scars for it sometimes too.
No, that is awesome. Because I tell you what, people come from different angles. I started off, as a dad being a coach, and fell in love with the sport day one. It was the same thing. I mean, I would be on the mat side waiting they were my idols. All the wrestling people I grew up with, I can name them. I could going back from 3-4 years old all the way through. And so just kind of be second nature. Bill, kind of the same way a lot, but Bill canceled cable to make sure he just had wrestling on all the time for the flow and stuff. A little bit different level than me, but it's pretty good. No, the first question I had was going to be, what was your beginning wrestling experience? Like, and you kind of brought that up a little bit. What got you out for the sport?
What brought me into the wrestling room was a very convincing wrestling coach and a little bit of stupidity on my part. No, actually, I knew Pocosin when I moved there in 7th grade. I knew the city had a reputation for high school wrestling. I didn't know much about it. I know that I'd heard about, my freshman year was 1993-94. And that year they had 3 state champions and were real close, had a couple injuries, and they would have dethroned Grundy that year. And Grundy was coached by Kevin Dresser at the time, who is now the Iowa State head coach. And I remember calling in the newspaper to get this, before the internet, I'm calling in the sports desk to see if there's any update on how Pocosin was doing out in Salem, which is in the other part of the state. We were a AA high school, a middle-sized high school. At the time, there were 3 public school classes. I won't go into the debacle that is the Virginia High School League now, but I knew we were good, and I was into sports. I was announcing baseball, or I soon to announce baseball, and I was like, oh, okay. The Jewel twins won a state title. A guy named Jared Fitzpatrick won a state title. He would end up being a national qualifier for VMI later. And I just knew it was there, but I didn't really do anything other than that. I was announcing baseball my freshman year, and sophomore year rolls around, and I'm going to start play football, but there were some issues at home that I had a younger sister who's about 6.5, 7 years younger than I was. And I had to spend a little bit more time at home. So being at football practice every day after school wasn't exactly going to work for my home life. So I was like, well, I did the stats in PA for baseball. What's in the fall? Well, at that time in Virginia, the AA and single A high schools, because of gym space, most of them had smaller gyms. There wasn't these AAA high schools that had the 2 and 3 gyms where boys and girls basketball and volleyball and all these sports could practice at the same time. Well, our girls basketball was in the fall, volleyball was in the winter, and the boys basketball was in the winter. So I ended up talking to the girls basketball coach, like, hey, I want to stay involved in sports. I need something that's not going to be as busy as football. And so I started doing the stats there, and then through that, got to meet some people that were from the town, including the guy who trained me on the PA. And a friend of his, a guy named Terry Daniels, probably the time I was early my sophomore year, he goes, hey, Jason, I'm going to the wrestling match on Wednesday. You want to go? And, it's a small town. You could, it's a mile to my house, pretty much from anywhere in any direction to the high school. I was like, yeah. So he scooped me up, and we went and watched, and Pocosin High School was wrestling Deep Creek, a AAA school, and we won the match 36-33. And he was telling me the rules. It was a dual meet. So one of those, those, that's why I love dual meet so much, is it was if you'd have taken me to a massive 60, if you'd have taken me to the Rumble on the Red, I probably would have never come back because I didn't know what I was watching, but a dual meet was so easy. So I remember going to this event, and then 2 days later was the Virginia Duels, which was a very big, we didn't have it this year. It would have been the 41st annual this year, but it was the birthplace of the dual meet advancement concept. So the National Duels was born out of there. So here I am, a sophomore in high school, skipping school on a Friday to go to the Virginia Duels 2 days after I'd seen my first match. And that year I alluded to how good the school was. Well, it was the first year of the National High School Tournament. This was long before the Clash was even around. And so it was January 95, and we wrestled and I say we, I wasn't even on the team yet. We wrestled the 18th ranked team in the country, McEachern, Georgia, and beat them 27-26. And it was, that tells you that type of high school dual meet score doesn't exist. I mean, no forfeits. I mean, just knock down, drag out. It was a war, and it just sucked me in. So the next year we get a new coach, and I'm interested in, I'm starting to announce wrestling now because I knew we were good, and it was our basketball team was 1-22. The wrestling team was ranked nationally. Which team would you want to be associated with? Yeah. Well, Coach Billy Ruff had kind of been trying to tug me in. And I wasn't the most athletic kid. I wasn't just, I wasn't non-athletic. I just didn't, I was trying to do things to think about broadcasting versus actually being a competitor. And by that junior year rolls around, and for some reason I get talked into coming out. Now, that was not a very pretty sight. Spent most of my time training spent a lot of the summer wrestling, trying to get better, trying to make up for, 16 years of not wrestling. And ultimately what was strange is I brought a guy out named Dan McAdams to basically be my drill partner, because I was basically the only heavyweight in the room, because our other heavyweight was dropping down to 89. And, we had a teammate that passed away that summer, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to wrestle for Mike. And he lived around the corner from me. And then I'm in there training. I'm learning how to wrestle, and it's to the point where I'm asking one of our old guys that was like a blood round guy in like in the early '90s, like, "Hey Scott, can you teach me how to wrestle?" And he's like, "What year are you?" I was like, "I'm a senior," and he just kind of shook his head, he's like, "Oh man." Yeah, so eventually I bring out Dan, and so I'm on the team, and well, the guy I brought out to be my drill partner beats me out for the spot. Pretty much. And he was bigger, stronger, meaner. He was just a meaner dude. And this was a sport he was more wired for. I was only about 210 pounds at the time. I remember my first ever tournament I weighed in the off season was the Bethel Open. And I weighed 208 pounds, and I got pinned by the single A state champion who came to the tournament looking for our starter because he was the only guy in the area he hadn't beaten, and he got me in my first ever match, wearing the shorts and the T-shirt and the borrowed wrestling shoes. So my entry into the sport was very, very, it was low key. And,
humbling.
No, humbling was when the guy above you is a regional champ, the guy below you is a regional champ, and you're just trying to score. I took my assistant coach down, Alan Hackman, down one time. Now, he was a coach at Jefferson Forest High School. Now he coached at Liberty University for a little bit too. I let him know about this every time I see him because it's the only time I ever took him down. I think it's the only time.
Was he 65?
No, he was at the time in his 20s. So
okay, just kidding.
Yeah, I hit an inside step on him that was just so. It was the point where I was like, Hackman, I scored. He goes, "Well, I would say I let you have it, but you hit it so pretty, I couldn't really do anything on it. It's like the best shot of my life." So I will still give Hackman. It's like, "Hackman, I took you down, right?" And he goes, and he can't even. It's to the point where he can't be like, "I let you have it." He just shakes his head and just like, "Yeah, you did." So
So then tell me the process and how you started moving up the ladder. Because you were.
Well, it wasn't in the wrestling room because that ladder, I wasn't going anywhere. I was at the bottom of it.
Well, yeah, because I tell you what, the announcing and everything else, it takes a progression because, you just don't all of a sudden become on the top kind of where because I would consider you are on the mecca of where I would love to have been. Kind of announcing in the Olympics is phenomenal.
There's only one thing I want to do bigger, and that is something I'll probably have to wait to LA to even have an opportunity. And I'm going to kind of,
okay.
What is a wrestling announcer is the biggest thing you can do? It's the Olympics. It's the world. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I have aspirations of maybe being that guy that goes Albania at like at the opening ceremonies. I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy in LA. I got to figure out how to make that happen because I want to be like Greece. The Federated States of Micronesia. It's like entering the facility. I want to be that guy. I want to do the opening ceremony. So that's like the one thing that I can't. That's probably bigger than doing the wrestling thing.
Tell us kind of a few integral steps which you took along the way to move up. Can you pinpoint a couple of them? What happened?
Well, it wasn't always the only reason I really jumped on the PA initially is because I didn't have access to a radio station. When I was in high school. A lot of these high schools now have like massive audiovisual departments, and kids are coming into high school knowing how to produce a podcast on their phone. I knew I wanted to be in sports broadcasting, and when I moved in ninth grade, we had a little PA box at the baseball field. We also had, there was a press box at the football stadium. We played it behind the middle school, like a lot of small schools around the country know. If I'd have stayed in Newport News, all the city schools played at one place, Todd Stadium, and they've had a guy named Bill Nettles who is still announcing. He's done 1,000 games. Like he has been announcing at Todd Stadium for decades. So I wouldn't have an opportunity to announce there. Well, moving to a smaller school gave me that opportunity, and the AD and the baseball coach were like, okay. So it was basically starting with an interest in asking. Like I'd like to, announce. Do you want to do our stats and do the PA? And I'm like, yes. So getting that opportunity, that baseball, so it always is the first step. Actually, it even goes a little before then because I had actually volunteered for a semi-pro football team that played at that Todd Stadium and got involved in just kind of like the world of sports, like stats and spotting and just looking how announcers. A guy named Andy Cohen who was was a real estate agent back then, and he probably still is, and he just had this cheesy, hilariously funny. He could do Cosell really well. He's just a real fun guy, and he kind of, I kind of was spotting for him, and I kind of, emulated that a little bit. But to start out, I listened to a lot of broadcasting, and so I listened to sports radio when I grew up. I'd pick up. There were stations out of Cincinnati that I could pick up on AM radio at night. Xavier basketball was huge. I was a huge basketball junkie back in middle school. And, of course, Old Dominion basketball was on the sports radio station where I grew up. So I was paying attention to a lot of that. I was watching Sports Center a lot. Like I had envisions of being anchoring on Sports Center. So I listened to the broadcasters that I liked. I tried to listen to all sports radio. I was picking up, WFAN out of New York sometimes at nights because the signal, I mean, who knows what you guys pick up in the Dakotas, but, it's like, whoa, moose jaw. It was just one of the things I started listening. And then like in sports writing, you read the best writers to develop what is good. So ultimately when I started doing baseball, then the soccer coach came and asked me to do it. And I was just doing the stats and a little bit of the PA for the girls basketball, but it was soccer that really got it because we had a really good team there, a good crowd. It was very boisterous. And then by the time I'm a senior, every event basically that was at home, except for football, because Senor Fay, our high school Spanish teacher, Tom Fay, he did football, and it was like, okay. And, we had, certain managers that did the book for boys basketball. I was like, all right, I'll come in and do the announcing. So I was doing, I think, 8 sports by the time I was a senior. So my mindset was get as much experience as I could going into college. So I would have that much more of an advantage I didn't know how competitive, when I decided to go to Old Dominion, how competitive the student radio station was going to be. I knew we had the sports radio station seriously, like at James Madison, it's super competitive to get on the radio there. Just Syracuse, I think, has 2 student radio stations. So Missouri's journalism school is phenomenal. I mean, there's a progression you have to do. So I was going to say, all right, I've got the local sports contacts. I'm going to hone my skills at ODU. And then in that meantime, I started announcing wrestling. And I did the regionals. We hosted regionals and sectionals my junior and senior year. Now, my junior year, I was disappointed because I thought I was going to be the top dog announcing. Well, Greg Martin, the guy who trained me on baseball, in the 80s, like, we're going to have Greg do it. And I was, you're 16 years old, full of piss and vinegar. You think I felt like I should be doing it because I've been doing it all year. Well, the next year, the AD had seen how well I had done and developed and was not a liability. Even though sometimes we had some interesting soccer situations with rival schools and principals that didn't like me announcing and playing music during games. That was another story. But so my senior year, though, I led the way. Greg was there with his equipment and totally, let me lead the way. And that was kind of a breakthrough moment. And then when I'm a freshman at ODU, there's a wrestling official named Ken Berger who is actually, fast forward, he was one of the English voices in London on the microphone, and he had worked the junior worlds, and he'd been an Olympic level referee, a FILA ref, and I was a high school coach in Northern Virginia before he retired from the Marine Corps and lived down in Virginia Beach, and he got in touch with Wayne Martin, who was Steve Martin, the head coach at Great Bridge at the time, and then the coach at Old Dominion after I graduated. Well, Wayne Martin was running the Eastern Regional Wrestling Tournament my freshman year in college, and that was at Churchland High School, and it's like, hey, he calls me up, it's like, hey, Ken Berger and spoke highly of you. Would you be interested in announcing a regional? I'm 18 years old, and I'm thinking Eastern Region, this is AAA. I was at AA school. So I went out there and I did it. And then the next year I go to Lake Taylor High. I remember this one too, because this is kind of that story, that progression. Russell Flynn was the athletic director at Lake Taylor High School in Norfolk. They had a real big kickoff dual meet tournament that they did. It wasn't a tournament. It was like a showcase. Like, you come in, you wrestle a couple duels, 3 mats. It's like, all right, highlight Friday, Saturday night, 7 o'clock is where your hammers. It's like Great Bridge versus Cox. So you had your monster to bring people in. It was it was an awesome event. So they had started a Friday afternoon thing. So I go over to Lake Taylor and introduce myself to Russell Flynn, who's the AD. He was a longtime wrestling coach there, which definitely worked. I said, and he said, yeah, I can't afford to pay you because Ken Berger was doing the Saturday. I said, well, I'll do it for you for free. I lived 10 minutes away in campus. So I was on the other side. So I came over and I did the Friday. Ken was actually reffing one of the duels. They had the whole school come in during the activity period. So we got a bunch of people there. And then basically that became the kickoff as I did the Friday and then Ken did the Saturday. The next year they threw me some cash. So, in that goodwill gesture. And then Western Branch coach heard me. And then the second week I started doing Western Branch rotational. Third weekend, I'd go up to Colonial Forge, and by the time I'm going through college, I'm paying my tuition, announcing wrestling tournaments on the weekends. And at the time, you're getting $300 a weekend for 20 years ago. That's 25 years ago. It's like I can not only can I eat, I could stock my fridge with some of the finest of natural light without a problem. I didn't have to sit there and dial my phone to make sure my direct deposit for my part-time job went through so I could pay my bill at last call. It's just so I just started announcing things, and then I get called to do events across the state. So ultimately, and I did things at ODU. I did the home duels there. I did the field hockey national championships in 2000. That ODU hosted. So I did a couple soccer games there, but mostly it was wrestling. And, my schedule, my second semester, I figured out, oh, wait, I can't do this and go to school full time very well. So I made my second semesters, I had no Friday classes specifically so I could announce wrestling tournaments. So then when I go to the newspaper full time, they pull me off of wrestling, which was, it was a short 2 months. I was full-time at a paper I'd worked at 8 years, get picked up by the NWCA, and then my announcing career is pretty much kind of shelved for a bit. Doing a little bit of broadcasting here and there, but ultimately that's where running Intermat is sort of doing the high school rankings nationally, because I'd had that Matt Talk website throughout the course of the time. So when I'm announcing tournaments, I'm also getting the results. That's how Matt Talk Online really started rolling, because I'm there, I'm getting all the box scores, I'm typing them all in, I'm also making sure they're in the paper. So I had a direct access to put the stuff that I was getting at the tournaments on the web and in my local paper, because I worked part-time at the newspaper on the sports desk. So there was a lot of different things that kept this thing rolling. Well, ultimately, I got back into it in 2008. I did Franken and Marshall's home dual meets while I was in there to kind of do some things. And F&M at the time was pretty terrible. We're talking a Division I dual meet on, I think they wrestled Dell State on a Friday night, and that was maybe 15, 20 people there. And then the next day it was, a Saturday at noon. And the only people there were like the guy who swept the stuff out from the trash last night, the teams, and maybe like two parents that were local. I mean, it was like, it was very empty in Mazer Gymnasium, which is actually named after a wrestling Hall of Famer there at Franklin and Marshall. But then I announced the EIWAs, then come out, and basically it's progression. It was the Midlands, Drew Periano, really, when he was a coach at Northwestern. Him and Matt Storniolo really said, hey, let's bring JB in. I started working with Sandy there, and once I started getting the groove back with the Midlands, and the Ncaa people were aware of me. The NWCA has always been an advocate for me in that role. I know Pat Tossie's like, yeah, well, Jason, I think, is ready. When I'm 25, I thought I was good enough to do the Nationals. I wasn't mentally prepared to do it. So a lot of it is growing up. You can come out and think you're the next best thing. Well, you got to pay your dues. And that's something that I felt all of this stuff did is a lot of paying my dues, because I did have to wait. And, it's like, I moved out here to Wrestling 411, 11 years ago, and that tanked. And that was an ego. That was a shot to the ego. It was a gut check. I was like, all right, let's not be in such a damn hurry, So came back, and, I landed on my feet pretty well from that. But, it's USA Wrestling gave me a lot of opportunities when it came to broadcasting. And then when I got back to the PA, the opportunity comes out to get a test event in Rio, and that was because of help with the Save Olympic Wrestling movement, the people I met through Brazil, like Pedro Gamafila. I was just trying to do some broadcasting there. I get down there for the test event. The day before I left, I found out, I'm trying out for PA. Cool. So and a lot of it happened fast too, because I got the Olympics, the NAIA, the Division III, and the Division I for the first time all in the same year. So 2016 was quite the jumping off point. I realize that's a long answer to a short question, but yeah, it was incremental. I mean, it's like it's a progression. I don't sit there and I didn't think I could do the state high school. I actually didn't do the state high school tournament in Virginia until I moved to Pennsylvania. Because Ken had that down south, and when it went up north to where, oddly enough, the guy who hired me to do it is my announcing partner at the NCAA, is Brian Hazard. He hosted the championships at Robinson Secondary, a giant high school up there. So the opportunities that, it's a lot of it's been relationship building. I'll sit there and I'll talk wrestling to anybody for hours at a time, and talk about experiences and stuff. And that's the stuff that really kind of moves me. It's like I'll sit down, and I use the turf as an example in Fargo. I've met everybody in the sport of wrestling. Actually, let's dial this in. Let's make this meta for Dakota Grappler. I've met pretty much everybody in the sport of wrestling in Fargo, North Dakota. The turf in my younger years was like, all right, well, night's over. JB's going to the turf. And here it is, 2:30 in the morning in the parking lot, talking to some All-American or national champion that's just out there coaching with the team, just learning, meeting people, and picking up knowledge. Because my wrestling knowledge about what I saw prior to 1998 is limited. So I'm still going back and learning that type of stuff. So it's those relationships, and now Herd and Horns has kind of emerged as you grow up, you go to Herd and Horns. Now when you don't, and I always joke about the turf, you don't start there. You always end up there, but you never start there. So,
well, you shouldn't start there. Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't. I mean, I remember, jeez, I got too many stories I can tell about that place. Most of them off the record, but yeah, that's really been kind of the it's a long answer, but there's a lot of stories in there and a lot of people that have had, I've hopefully given enough people some credit along the way for really helping me and being supportive, because there was a time, I'll be honest with you, I was a little brash. To do what we do, you have to have a little bit of ego, because it's not like you can't be completely, you gotta be confident up there. I mean, you're commanding I'm commanding a microphone in Madison Square Garden. You want to talk about nerves and jitters? Holy crap. That is the world's most famous arena. Not everybody just gets in there and be like, hey, yeah, can you pull a dad out of the stands to announce? No. that is $1 million sound system right there.
So what's your go-to? Do you have a call? Do you have a certain energy to you to bring to the microphone? What do you have I don't know.
I haven't brought up any catchphrases or anything. I just try to be myself more than anything else. If there's exciting action, I'm going to go, wow. I mean, there's just stuff. I'm not the show. So my goal is to simply supplement the action, or, when there's something that you can start to hear a dull roar over on Mat 8, what's going on. And so I do borrow, I don't want to say I take, there's homage that I do pay to the late Ed Aliverti. Because Ed, I got to know when I was a kid, at Virginia Duels, he was the voice, a thump and a thud, just his poetic nature and his voice, just how he, just explained wrestling to a new person. Sometimes it would be like, wow, who's that guy in the mic? And then if you'd never heard him do the anthem, you got to be ready for it, because the first time you heard him do it, you're going to crack up, because you're like, wait, what's this guy doing? America! He was so good. So I will pay homage to Ed the way I call a fall. It'll usually be like, fall, I'll just kind of let it drain out, because our voices are different. I don't copy Ed, but that's just kind of the way I call it. And I try to stay away from some of his catchphrase. His thing was a possible pin. I kind of, get away from that, using that exact terminology, because Ed, he didn't set the bar. He made the bar. He goes, here's where your line is. Now, try to go for that. So I always try to be respectful of that. And that's the thing. I still haven't really developed a catchphrase. I feel like I feel like I do add a little bit of humor to it. There might be probably more pop culture references in there. That or maybe even I do throw some pro wrestling references in there, and sometimes they may one time I think one of the kids from George Mason went through a table, right through the Spanish announce table, and that one got a pretty good one. Or I think kid had blood to Crimson Mask down here on 3, because that's the pro wrestling when you get color. I might add that one this year. You get a little color down there on 2. But ultimately, it's just I don't really.
How about the names? How much time do you have to study to make sure you get the names pronounced right?
I will say this. I'm going to interrupt. He is the absolute best.
I know. That's what I'm trying. I've been amazed.
If I'm not, you wouldn't know any differently.
Well, it's especially when you go overseas. But you do it really. There's no doubt that there's a lot of time put into it.
Yeah, I run a spreadsheet, and I do a lot of things phonetically, and then internationally, it's just basically learning the cultures and stuff, and what Georgian names look like, and there's Vilis and Adzes and Idzes, and then the Belarusians have a slightly different alphabet with their Cyrillic, so their U's are actually pronounced V's. So you see, it looks like Vladislav. No, it's Vladislav. So those type of things. Mongolians are tough. French-speaking African countries are very tough. A lot of extra vowels. The Southeast Asian countries that are not, Thailand typically doesn't have a whole lot of wrestling, but when they do, it's difficult. They had the Junior Worlds in 2012, and I'm like, okay, I'm really glad I'm not broadcasting this one. Just typing them up and to do the recap. It's like I remember Daringer wrestled the guys like, oh, I'm gonna have to look. I'm a Control C, Control V. I am not retyping that. But yeah, the prep work. I mean, I'm looking through as we record this, the qualifier, full qualifier list came out today with the at-larges, and I'm going through and I'm looking at. There's some names with the abbreviated season. I didn't have a whole lot of. There's still some names this year that I didn't really know, and because I was like, okay, Army West Point kid, gonna need to know how to say that name. There's like some of it's from covering high school and seeing them in college or covering in Fargo and knowing these kids through the rankings and you ask. So if I'll text a lot of coaches if it looks like a routine name. I'd be like, is that like Bono in Midlands 1 year? Is that modal or model? He goes, model. He goes, why would you even ask that? That's a name you look at and be like, model. Well, because that's you ask. And sometimes you get it wrong. And I know one year it was for years I thought it was Frank Mattias. He wrestled at Penn. He was at Blair Academy. And I remember when he was a freshman, I was like, Chaz, their SID. I was like, Chaz, he goes, Mattias. Okay. So I said it Mattias for years. Hazard and I said it Mattias for years. Senior year, we're at Nationals, and all of a sudden Hazard runs into his grandfather. He goes, Mariachi. So his senior year, it was no longer was Frank Mattias, it's Frank Mariachi. And he said, oh, look at the old man up there. He's from the old country. He's appreciating it. But a lot of research, now it's a lot of text. Now overseas, I'll use Google Translate. I'll walk up to a coach who I know who speaks English, or I ask English, or I'll use Google Translate and be like, how do you say this? And usually I'll have them recorded into my phone. I'll hit record so I can hear it a bunch of times. So certain sayings, I had an idea of saying world champion in each of the native countries' languages. Didn't think that to me, I tried it with the Cuban, who was right off the bat in Nur Sultan, champion du monde. And I'm like, no, it didn't work. So I guess back to your question about the catchphrase. I think it's how I call a champ call. I think, calling world champion, you hit the, or how I say, 2-time, that is, you pop it. It's probably the pop when right before they get their hand raised. Last year, Mekhi Lewis won it, and just maybe that inner knowledge, because Virginia Tech used to be known as its full name is Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. Used to be known as VPI. And their chant was, hokey, 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 high, tech, tech, VPI. So when Mekhi won, I dropped this out, national champ, it's like I went, hokey, 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 high, national champion, VPI. And I popped that over the arena. And you can still hear that in it caught a lot of the Tech fans like, wait, did he say VPI? So, I'll throw a little of that history. But again, the catchphrase is the champ call. So that really is. But as far as the terminology and then the names go, I just try to do as best I can. Sometimes I can't ask 330 guys every year. I can't ask 900 entries at a world championships, but I just try to do the best I can.
I have to give you some kudos because I actually listened to you a little bit this year before because I've done the broadcasting probably 13 years now at the state wrestling tournament, but I'm on TV, and they've got these shortcuts between the championship, they win it, and to go to commercial. And so I always try to get something out really quick, and I get cut off sometimes. It's like, and the state champion from, and they're going to commercial. I'm going, oh no, come on, guys. Keep it for at least 5 seconds.
You got to get your producer to give you a countdown. Give you, I was like, all right, we're 10 seconds, and it's like, now, 4-time Mid-American Conference champion, the first heavyweight in history from Central Michigan, Max Stencil. Back with more from the Mac here on ESPN Plus.
We have two people going, and he's I'm mainly the color guy, but I'm the guy that gives all the moves, all the stuff that's going on. And I got Bill involved this year too, because Bill's great. And we have 2 classes in North Dakota. And I listened to Bill's later, and Bill did the same thing as I did, trying to get in and stuff. But we research our wrestlers, and we know them. We know their families. We know everything that's going on. But I tell you what, Beck cuts it off real quick. I don't know if Bill caught that real quick too. Bill, what was
actually Jordan Hassler kind of did those and he's the kind of the boss, so they kind of let him get that in before they cut him off. So that was
I'm not the boss.
Jordan was nominated for Broadcaster of the Year.
He was,
the
yeah.
association. Yeah, I've watched a lot of bison duels. You know, it's funny. You pull it up on Flow. I was like, oh, okay. You know, I got the real, the big production there, and then Mike Kwame sitting Matt's side, so I get to bug him with texts whenever I say, hey, there's Kwame. Let me text him.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good product there with the NDSU wrestling for sure.
Yeah, Jordan was on. He came on the show, and then we had Shane Sparks on the show. I guess the only one we haven't had on is your partner out there. He was one of the nominees this year too, right? For the broadcaster of the year. Who are the three? Wasn't it? It was,
I know that they all run together for the years. I'm just trying to remember because we got those awards out really late.
Brian Hazard, I think, was the other one.
Yeah, well, he's another PA. Yeah.
Yep. So, just a quick story I'd like to hear you tell, because you mentioned the Mongolian names are tough to tell. What was it like when you were at the Olympics and the Mongolian coaches lost their minds as well as their clothes? That had to have been. That's it. I've probably listened to Jason talk more than just about anybody that I've heard talk ever, right? Because I've always got a podcast going in my ear. But this is a story I've never heard you tell. I've never heard you talk about it.
So when you're at the Olympics, there is a rigid set of rules and requirements. It used to be really like stoic, stone-faced, in the red from, Mongolia, whatever. And in the blue from the United States of America, Kyle Snyder. No inflection. Now, Berger actually helped change that up a bit in London. He got a little bit more pizzazz into it with some of his introductions. So now they've got these, it's called protocol. And protocol is the most mind-numbingly, it's like you're not allowed to deviate from the script. You cannot. The thing is, in wrestling, though, is you're an action announcer. The best thing about that is there's no script for calling the action. You get to do that there. But the situation is you don't draw any attention because you're hired. You are not speaking as an independent journalist. You are a hired gun. You do what they say, or you will be shown the door, never be invited back again. So basically, what's the adage? Don't F up. Don't. It's like but the goal is just do your best. So there in that situation. And here's the funny thing. I'm gonna set this up, Bill. The kid that lives down the block, Jack, he was 8 at the time when I got back. The first thing I got all the kids in the neighborhood Olympic stuff, and I was dropping them keychains and stuff like that. That was not cheap. So Jack goes, "Hey, what did you say when the Chinese guys started taking off their clothes?" And I'm like, well, Jack, they're Mongolians. And 2, I said nothing. So the scenario is unfolding, and already the officials had a rough day. A couple of them had a little rougher day than others, and a couple of them you don't see anymore. So the situation's unfolding with what was his name from I know the Uzbek. It was Ikhtiar Navruzov, because he had gotten the win over Gomez earlier in the day. What was it? It was one of the I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. I could pronounce it, but I just can't remember it. Well, it was the Mongolian. He gets the celebration. You always see what happens. He does this, and he gets cautioned in one. And the situation, I was like, and I look at it, and I'm like, no, I knew exactly what was unfolding. I'm like, they're not going to give him the caution. They're not going to caution him out. They're going to, and I'm talking to myself, and I'm next to Daniel Robin, who worked for United World Wrestling, or then Fila, or before then Fila. He kind of ran the wrestling competition in London, and he's the French announcer. And then Marcelo, who was an Olympian for Brazil back in '96. He was the Portuguese announcer, and we're all just like, we just can't believe what's going on here. Robin's like, he's yelling at the referee in French, or I don't know who he was yelling at. I don't know who he was friends with. But then to see what happened, and then he gets cautioned one, and then there's the brick, or in this case it was Vinicius, the mascot, got tossed on, and then they reviewed it and they said no, and it was like. And they took it away, and I'm like, I think there was a review. Maybe they lost it earlier. I just know the situation. I was waiting for the calm for it to die down to make the announcement. But he goes, there's the caution, and there's the one, and I was like, and then before they even raised the hand, I mean, there was probably 5-6 minutes went by between the end of the match and the actual announcement of the arm being raised, and it was just like, all right. I'm looking around at my producer. I'm like, I'm just going to let this go. I mean, if I said anything, in that moment that would have been anything other than the result, I'm done. And I'm aware of that because this is not good for the IOC. This is not good for UWW. This isn't good because, that's what got the headlines, not Kyle Snyder winning a gold medal. That was what was on TV. Yep. It's like the Mongolian stripping. I mean, and granted, it's a meme now. I mean, there's a keyboard out there with a Mongolian throwing. I remember when Michael Krales from Minnesota beat, was it the heavyweight from South Dakota State on a stall call with 10 seconds to go.
Walters, yep.
Yeah, no, this was I think it was Alex Mackey before then.
Oh, I think you're right. Yep.
Yeah, so and I just remember, and Bono was coaching, and it was like I used that image of the Mongolian throwing the shirt down, but like Jackrabbit fans right now be like, and I used the Mongolian image as the GIF, whatever you want to call it, and it was just surreal. So to answer your and Jack down the street's question, what did I say? Nothing. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. I sat there with my mouth hanging open and finally waited for the arm to get raised. I think I did say caution and one confirmed. And then all hell broke loose. And it was, and winner 7-7 on criteria. Your bronze medalist from Uzbekistan, Ikhtior Navruzov. And then it was just whistling, because the international boo is a whistle. You hear a lot of whistling, and it was just, it was like people were chanting on these Mongolians. They're like, yeah, when the other guy took his shirt off, it was like, oh, and then the other guy goes for his pants. The place went, wow, there was an audible just, it was just, I mean, it wasn't, it was surreal. It was one of the most maddeningly amazing things that I've ever seen in sports. And here I am, not saying a word about it.
Saying a word.
And his
man that talks for a living and can't say nothing about it.
Well, what do you say?
Right.
Yellow card, Mongolia. Red card. I mean, just at that point, you're just talking just to talk. You basically you lay out. You just like broadcasting. You let the moment take over. And sometimes that's the championship moment. You give them the pop. You let them do their lap. You might say something as they walk off. You give them their moment. You don't talk over their moment. That moment, you don't talk over that moment either, because it's their careers, and it might be yours too if you say the wrong thing, especially with the IOC. I mean, you don't get cheeky at the Olympics. So it had to have been an unbelievable sight. So. In more ways than one. Yeah, here we go.
There it is.
There. I know it's a 2-minute video. We're not going to watch it, but this is about half. I just started to scroll through it, and it's.
Yeah, because I'm in that shot. So if you look to your the left side of the screen, that second row, you can see where we're sitting. So it's kind of, So I'm over there, one row up, so go the other way where your mouse is the other side. Yeah, I'm over there. Yep. You see there's, you could probably see my receding hairline somewhere in there. There's a big guy with a goatee, and then so I'm next to him. I'm in between the bald Frenchman and then me. But this is that was when he was going. I remember him going. And what I learned later is in the Mongolian culture, when they give you your clothes, that's basically like, you have screwed me more than anything else. You've screwed me so bad. Here, take my clothes. You have. That is like the ultimate insult. Is like, if they give you your clothes, you had done them dirty. And I'm not talking about dirty clothes. I'm talking about you cannot have screwed me any worse. Now, here, take the clothes off my back to add insult to injury is kind of what it was explained to me. So I learned that after the fact. But yeah, that was.
Used to be like the Brazilians. If they lost in soccer, they probably wouldn't be seen again. You might as well take my clothes. Yeah.
That was also I believe that was also the Colombians were known for that one too. Yep. That was an interesting documentary. But
so Bill, do you got any major questions?
I do. I kind of want to go back.
I love
go back. I guess we'd be moving forward a little bit. So obviously,
Northern State Wolves gonna have a good weekend, right?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about, you mentioned Wrestling 411, but if we that was the first podcast that you guys did, right? I mean, and a lot of us would say it was the first wrestling podcast, but I know there was one
Matt
you found
Slammers in
since
Iowa. Matt Slammers is still going.
Still going, yeah.
You know, I had them on the show probably a couple years ago when I discovered them years after. I'm like, whoa, these guys are on Libsyn since like 06. And it was just a couple sessions from the state tournament back then, but that counts, and they're still going. So they're number one. Wrestling 411 was the second one. I know Casper had TDR on iTunes, off and on, depending on who his producer was. But consistently, I mean, I think right now, after Matt Slammer's Short Time might be the longest, like for Matt Talk goes. I mean, I had that since 2013, so that might be the longest running one. But the 411 was definitely at least the second podcast. I knew there was a Canadian one that was also going around that era, but there was a radio. It was like an archived radio show, and they were off and on with the RSS feeds too. So I know that it was at least one before me that I know of.
Right. So what gave you the idea that this is what we're going to do? Right. I mean, there was no doubt. There's no doubt if anybody knows Jason that we know that you're a great PA announcer, done it all over the world, and you're the best in the world. But the podcast deal is wild, right? I mean, the amount of podcasts that you are involved in have helped other people get started and roll, and even even if it's the Blood Run guys, I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, but you did it, so
I'll help anybody. That's the thing. I mean, I had a 90-minute call with Christian Piles on how to set up FRL and Libsyn, a 90-minute call with Mike Malanconico when he was doing his malicious intent. So basically, I've had a hand. I'll help anybody. Here's the thing. Right. If you're gonna do it, I want you to do it right. I don't want you to do, use something that's, the company might be gone in 6 months or a year, and you're left with no history or archives. So, just basically as part of that, just reach out. Or sometimes I do it unsolicited. Like I heard Blood Round for the first time. I'm like, why is this taking forever for me to download? I'm trying to listen to one of their, I'm talking like episode 7. Yeah, it's early. And I'm like, why is this file taking forever? And my data was just hogging. Well, Tommy and Kevin were uploading the WAV file, not the MP3, to their SoundCloud account, which I got them off of. And I went home and I downloaded it. I went to it. I found SoundCloud. I was like, why is this file? So I went download. It was the WAV file. I'm like, hey, guys, I just reached out. Love the show. You say a bunch of stuff I wish I could say sometimes. But can you, when you upload to MP3, he goes, yeah, no wonder we were getting shut off. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And then from then on, we've been friends ever since. So
great guy.
Overall WAV file. That's pretty good.
Yeah, because a WAV file is like 500 megs.
So what made you think that this was the way to go, right? This was the direction you wanted to head in with the business?
Well, I had started, I knew 411 was a podcast. Then I had started another podcast when I was at USA Wrestling, which is now there's like 15 versions of Matt Chats being thrown out there. Well, I had the first Matt Chat. I had the first USA Wrestling Matt Chat as well, Dave. And I'm sitting there and I did it. And when I came back here to Minnesota to basically work as the editor of Amateur Wrestling News, and the Open Mat and Amateur Wrestling News were blending, I was like, I want to do this like daily update thing. Like I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool to do a show where like I'd get an update, like, okay, here it is in the morning, and like here I'll call up, I use Mark Cody as an example when he was at Oklahoma. It's like, call up Mark Cody after a big win and get a 2-minute sound clip and put that in and make a legit ESPN like 30 for or 20 for 20 update that had here's today's big stories, and make it, you listen to it first thing in the morning, you get the day's news and nuggets. So I said, all right, well, let's do Short Time. And that was part of Amateur Wrestling News and the Open Mat. So and if you go back and listen to them, it was like, I'm Jason Bryant. This is a really monotone voice. And I had I wasn't really spirited. I was still learning how to do my radio style. I really hadn't done it in a long time. And, developing, okay, do they want personality? And ultimately those updates went a couple times a week. Had to write them out. It actually was a lot more work than, a 5 to 10 minute episode when it's scripted. That's a good 2 hours of work, because you got to go get the news, then you got to write up the news, then you got to read the news, then you got to edit the news, and you got to cut out your flubs, or you got to put your music in, then you got to upload the news, then you got to write your, copy your show notes in, then get a graphic, and then, it's a good 2.5 hours of work for like a 10-minute show sometimes, if you're doing that type of thing where it's scripted. So when the season ended, I kept Short Time. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to do an interview show now. So I did the guys that were randoms. I remember Denzel Desjournette from App State was one of my early ones. James English as the Penn State, got Taylor on, got Eric Grajales, who finally broke through. Those names that like you want to know more about, like the Southern Conference All-Star, Nathan Kreiser, the schools that don't get that. And then when Amateur Wrestling News and the Open Mat were having a little bit of an ownership squabble, I'm caught in the middle because ultimately I'm doing the layout and I'm doing all the website work. So it's like I'm kind of being pulled in both directions, and the ownership of the respective organizations were arguing about, okay, well, Jason's doing more for this than he is for this. They're arguing about who's paying me, and I found myself in a situation where I'm like, okay, I'm working and it's like 411. I'm working with not a paycheck. So ultimately, I'm on my way to Madison for the World Team Trials that summer of 14, or the spring, and I'm listening to College Sports Radio and XM Radio, and I'm like, Auburn football coaches show, Alabama coaches show, Oregon coaches show, LSU coaches show for college football. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I can do this for wrestling. Wrestling doesn't have this. Penn State has, Jeff Byers has a show. Iowa has some stuff. John Smith has a show. But other than that, wrestling programs they're not going to pay a radio station $25,000 a year to do a radio show, and or maybe be part of a radio station and mention, like, here the Gopher K-Fan has a show for the Gophers, but wrestling gets on maybe once every 6 months, if that. So I was like, all right, well, I think I can do this, because I'm like, what do I do? Because I knew my time with the Open Mat and Amateur Wrestling News was I had to basically pick a side at the moment, and I had to go with, well, I don't know who's going to pay me the longest, but I know who can pay me right now, and that guy was 5 minutes from here versus in another state, so I opted to stay with the Open Mat until ultimately probably that spring. It was about 18 months ultimately, but I said ultimately a lot of times. I just realized that it's a crutch word. So I'm listening to it, and I start thinking about it, and then I come up with a plan. I go to Fargo. I talked to some coaches that summer about the idea, and Rob Cole at Cornell, he's the one who says, no, you're offering too much for too little. You get a flat number, you offer this many shows, and then you sell it. And I kind of said, all right, I was thinking I was going to do a weekly show for these schools, and I can do one a week, blah, blah. No. Nope. And I've also learned right now that it's once every 2 weeks is probably about the max they want to do one anyway, because college coaches, they feel that they're busy. So when I had that out there, and I went down to the convention to pitch the idea, and at the time, Mike Dixon was the assistant coach at Old Dominion, went with the alma mater. I was talking to him. He's like, yeah. And he's talking about the budget. I'm like, how about this? Do it for this. He goes, I'll do it for that. Gave him the alumni discount. Had to get somebody in the door. I needed a guinea pig. The next morning, I meet with Kevin Dresser, who's now at Virginia Tech. I said, hey, I sent him a text. Hey, I want to talk to you about something. Well, what time you leave? So met him in the lobby for coffee. 20 seconds into saying what I was doing, he's like, I'm in. So I had my first 2 guinea pigs right there, 2 schools that I knew, 2 coaches that I've known since high school, and that pretty much laid the groundwork for where the foundation was. And in 2014, 2015, there wasn't a whole lot of wrestling podcasts. And from there, the explosion went, and then I had Maryland jumped on board. I had a Division III school, Buena Vista, Jeff Brees jumped on board, and then we had Virginia USA Wrestling did, and and not every show is meant to last forever. So if you scroll to the bottom of Mat Talk Online, there's about 18 shows that have come and gone. They've had a lifespan. I'd love to fire Rocked Up back up with Little Rock, but that was a 12-episode series about the birth of Little Rock Wrestling. I don't feel like it needs... If there's a second Little Rock show that's more of an interview show like I'm doing, it's going to probably be called Rocked Up, but it's not. That's a different vein. That's something completely different. So that type of projects allow me to do things a little more artistically. I was involved with the Etched in Stone stuff too. So you got the NWCA want to do a show with me, the Hall of Fame. I'm a voice on a lot of these other shows as an introduction, Bashamania. That's me doing the pro wrestling voice too. It's like, that's Bashamania. It's just the fun stuff. So I felt like the medium was something that I could control. It's something that I could also be artistic and journalistic and stay fresh with the pipes too. And, learn a new skill. I knew a lot about video editing. I haven't had to do that much anymore. That world has changed. And now audio editing. And then sound correction and getting, now I'm doing more live stuff. So like I use StreamYard here as I look like I'm frozen on the screen for a second. But I use StreamYard quite frequently like you guys do, and I have different camera setups now. I've got the bar behind me that I can do broadcasts from over there. I can run everything through a Stream Deck over here. I got a nice 20-foot extension cable. I'll sit over there, watch wrestling on that TV, and have StreamYard. I'll do a live chat with people, call it Watching Wrestling. So I think that what started as the podcast, and now anybody can whip up a podcast, which is great because it gives you another voice. But I just felt like it was the perfect vehicle for wrestling at the time, because as much as the medium was, I started listening to shows before I started doing shows. I'm like, I can do this for wrestling. And I think ultimately me jumping in, and not to pat myself on the back, I said that word again. Now I'm aware of it. I think when I jumped into it, I think other people saw the benefits of it too. So there's no question that wrestling has always been an internet-based sport. I mean, Intermat was crazy popular back in the 90s when we were like, that's the only way we were getting coverage was the internet. And then podcasting is the same way. I mean, Purdue's got a show, NC State's got a show, which reminds me, I've got to edit that tonight. We've got all sorts of schools that are doing things, and whether or not you want me to be hosting and producing, or whether or not you want me to just edit the show or just be on the network. I mean, I've had to adapt to my business model too, because not everybody's going to want me hosting. You know, I don't know if you listen to all the Matt Talk Network, you don't need 20 shows with me narrating them all. So that's one thing. It's nice to have other people on board, and they see the value of the network too. So as long as I think it's definitely helped growing, and what these schools are seeing is that wrestling is their most popular podcast if they have more than one. And they're seeing wrestling, and that's a lot of it because of the network effect that I've got with Matt Talk Online.
Yeah, I can believe that.
You subscribe to a show. I mean, we had somebody listen to one of my Old Dominion shows when one of my good friends passed away 2 years ago, and there was a comment in iTunes. The comment was like, I usually don't listen to this show, but I just let play, and it was one of the that's the type of thing that makes me feel good. Is you learn more about Virginia. You live in the Dakotas, and you're learning about Virginia Tech. It's that you don't just have to be dialed into one team. I mean, that's the one thing. Listen to the Purdue show. You listen to NC State, and then you listen to Virginia Tech and NC State back to back. And realize those two programs have a real nice rivalry with one another, and they're both on the network. It makes me smile. So ultimately, I think it was. There's that word again. Driving me nuts, man. Oh. I'm gonna write that down. I used to say with that. I got rid of saying with that. So well,
ultimately you don't say with that anymore.
Yeah.
So what's the direction you'll be heading next? Are you going to try to do more, try to get YouTube going, a channel, different things like that? Have you got, that's kind of the newest thing for a lot of people, but yet it's not new technology.
No, now that I have a studio built, and this room was not like this when we bought this house. This is a renovation. This is a hidden room. It is a true speakeasy. There's a hidden door. You don't know this is an office unless you know where to look. And that's the cool thing about it. It's my space. I have 2 little girls in the house and a wife. So there'll be 3 women in this house at one point in the future, not so far ahead. And I need my own space. So this is wired. I've got the cabling running through the ceiling from over there. So I built that for basically people to come over, and Ty Eustace actually kind of gave the idea, that the Joe Rogan fight companion kind of thing. That's what Watching Wrestling is. And the idea is have somebody behind me at the bar, a guest, whether it be like Immel would come over because he lives close now, or Brandon Paulson or somebody that obviously pre-COVID is the idea. And we'd sit there and we'd have a chat room open and we'd watch wrestling and talk about it and just BS and tell stories, and kind of like we did with the Watching Wrestling segment. So the video component now that StreamYard.
Now, stall warning on Putman, so this is where you're right. Now, another shot.
Makowski sent me a video.
Oh, yeah. That's the one from. Yeah, that was that'd have been UNO, I think. I think that was UNO and Minnesota State. Did a couple down there that year, 4-1. But I want to do some video. I don't want video editing is cumbersome. It's like 4 minutes of audio editing for 1 minute of audio. And video, it's typically 8 minutes for every 1 minute of video. So I kind of want to just do the like start, stop, and not have to worry about cutting things up unless I drop an F-bomb or something, which I don't want an F-bomb to be dropped.
That's kind of like the live interview process is a lot better than taking pieces and putting it together.
Yeah. So developing a podcast like Little Rock is infinitely more difficult to construct and create than all right, today we're talking with Coach Neil Ayersman, and just hit start, stop, cut out some coughs and do some, some sound correction and leveling and upload it. I would like to do some more video. This year we had a truncated season, so I didn't get to do the watching wrestling thing. Because normally on Friday, I've got an iPad up with one match. I got another match on another TV, and I got my phone tweeting and texting my friends. So I wanted to bring that all into one room. So that was part of that. I want to do a little bit more of that. Doing some of the live interviews, and Rockfin's been beneficial there. I've got it on Rockfin. I'll post the video to those that are on Patreon, because what I do there is there's a couple different ways I'm trying to bring in revenue. Patreon, of course, Bill, you've been a patron. Thank you for a long, long time, and it's something that I want to be able to give. I don't want them to have to choose. Like, okay, well, I want to get this over here, so I'll put the video up. You'll get live on Rockfin. I'll put the video up immediately, as I can do it on a unlisted YouTube channel, which I'll then put into Patreon, and then so you'll get the video, and then you get the ad-free stuff on Patreon. But the video stuff, I'm trying to do some live stuff. If that's the benefit of on the Rockfin side, they can give me a free channel or a channel that I'll do the interviews live, and then the archive immediately goes premium. So just having a strong video and audio helps. I think that what we've learned through COVID is now people aren't averse to doing video. This is just like StreamYard. What we're using here is easier than Zoom. It's click a link and put some headphones on. And this type of format works well. I use it. I can do all sorts of cool branding with it that exports, and I can use that audio for a podcast. Now, if I'm worried, and I always record it locally too. So I know I had a show with, I was talking to Tom Maloney at Calumet College of St. Joseph last week, and when we were talking over each other, there was something with the bleed through on his side. Well, I had the audio, and I just cut that stuff out of the audio side. I didn't have to split a track. I already did it. So being able to repurpose that stuff, but I do want to be able to do more in the studio here, because I've got my Stream Deck hooked up. you can see the iPad behind me. I'm testing that as a wireless camera, because I just got another webcam. I didn't need to buy the big. I didn't have to peddle the patrons for to try to get a mirrorless camera that I didn't need. It's like, okay, it was a $90 fix instead of a $900 fix. Better use of my income there, because I don't have any wrestling to really talk about. So I do want to get more of the video. I want to get more interactive stuff. It's kind of hard. There's a lot of competition in the space now. There's a lot of battling for the ear. So while there's the video component of it, I also want to spend time doing more historical stuff. And when I say historical, I mean educating the generation we have now about things that happened in the pre-Flow era. And I use that because 2006 is when Flow came on the scene, and there's a lot of best evers that seem to that stop at like 2006. So, and in my knowledge of college wrestling, I remember watching my first D1 Nationals. I think it was whatever year Teague Moore pinned David Morgan. I want to say 98 or 99, probably 98, because that was the year I saw Teague Moore score 99 takedowns at the Virginia Duels or something sick. So to be able to do old shows from the stacks of amateur wrestling news I have just off screen, to narrate Don Cyanga's The Oldest Sport columns, to look at some of those old features that were written and put a voice to them. These are stories that nobody's ever read. I'm 41, and the people that have last read them were probably in their 50s, because that's the generation that really read amateur wrestling news growing up. Yeah. And we got it, but the real features were in the 80s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, are where the real wrestling journalism was. And those stories they're in pages now. They're not really out there. So I've got permission from John Hoke, and Don, before he passed away, gave me permission to narrate some of that stuff. So I'd like to get into doing those chronological stories of voicing some of these great stories. And then maybe even getting into audiobooks too, because there's a lot of wrestling books that are popping up, and hey, I've got the equipment, I got the stuff to be able to do audiobooks. I know I'm going to work something with Jamie Moffat, who wrote the Greg Strobel book, and I talked with him, and we're going to do some sample stuff with some chapters to see how it works, because the book's out of print. And do we do it as a podcast? Do we do it as an audiobook? We're just playing around things. So there's a lot of things that COVID really messed up, because I can't find it. I had it right here. I'm going through now and building databases of what years we lost wrestling programs. I know I've got that list, the Drop Project, but I'm trying to go through and get a concrete answer, because I'm sick and tired of fake stats being repeated. Oh, we had over 600 D1 teams. No, we didn't. We don't even have 600 D1 schools now. We have 351. So to say, oh, we lost 1,000 programs. No, we haven't. We might have had 1,000 programs at one point. And you know what? Do you schools closed? There are hundreds of schools have closed. Do you count that as a Title IX cut? No, the school died. Ncaa College died. Had nothing to do with Title IX. So those are the things that I want to make sure. If we're going to argue about losing programs, I want our stats to be right too.
Sure.
And I've got, as I work for myself, I have the time to do it. I just need to make sure that I can find that time, because when you're teaching remotely a third grader learning how to carry the one, it's put a lot of my summer projects off, and I hope I can get around to them, because I do like spending time with my kids. I don't like teaching third grade math, but some of those things that I want to do for the sport that I feel at 41, the next youngest historian is not 41. So, and we've lost a lot of really, really great minds over the last couple of years, because those were the ones that were compiling this stuff in the 60s and 70s. And, somebody's got to keep it going. So I'm glad the Hall of Fame is reached out there. But that's what I really want to do. I want to be able to put some historical pieces and, maybe narrate some books and just use my talent that I've trying to continually improve on to help the sport of wrestling even more. So I'm out there. I'm looking, maybe I'll talk to the Pat Hogan guy. I had him on the show about his wrestling ABCs. Adeline Gray suggested I read that in my announcer voice. Like I'm like, that would be cool. I haven't done it yet. It's on my to-do list, just like the Strobel book. So there's a lot of things I want to do, and it's just I hope I can have the time to do it.
Well, awesome. I tell you what, you've got a bright future. You're still pretty young. We're all young at heart, wrestlers, but. We're past our hour time. I don't know what your schedule's like, but I have some quick fire questions I ask all my guests.
Fire away.
And so I'm going to pop them up on the bottom.
All right.
Okay.
See, this is what I'm going to have to learn this, because you're teaching me something about StreamYard that I haven't done yet.
Yes. Okay. So on the far side, yep. So on the bottom, how about this first question? If somebody what would it be like to be coached by you?
All right. Well, I do hold a USA Wrestling Bronze Coaches certification. I have coached at the World Team Trials. I have coached at the US Open for various friends who needed somebody to corner them. To be coached like me would be frustrating, because you know more than I do. Knee slide. I need to maybe preface that. Folk style or freestyle?
Okay. Well, let's go freestyle.
Circle in. That's basically the extent of crawl forward. That's basically blue passive. That would be it. It would be really, really. My coaching record is 2-5. So you would not be if any win would improve my win percentage. So
okay, here's some more good ones. Here we go. Gatorade or Powerade?
Gatorade. Not even a question.
What color?
Lemon lime. Old school lemon lime.
There we go. Here's a good one for you guys. For you, my size and your size. Popsicles or dilly bars?
Ooh. Growing up, I was a big fan of the Bomb Pop.
There we go.
But we didn't have a lot of Dairy Queens where I grew up. I have one a half mile from here. And, with certain things, as you get older, you don't eat as much ice cream as you did when you were a kid. And I have to basically pick and choose. And the size of the Blizzard used to be here. Now it's maybe this one. But I found the butterscotch dilly bar is like heavenly. It's because I don't eat ice cream very often anymore. I've kind of replaced that vice with the craft beer, which I don't know which is better for my waistline. One's better for my blood sugar. One's it's good for the waistline. But I think the butter now at my age now, I think the butterscotch dilly bar is the way to go.
Okay. Mama's boy or rebel?
I'm from the South, so you can probably figure out the mama's boy side of it. And being from the South, rebel means something completely different. You got to think of that. I'm gonna, I will say I kind of neither, honestly.
Okay.
Because I not to get too deep into upbringing, but I was kind of doing independent things at an early age. So like I said, I was announcing all those sports. Yep. There's a reason for that. And
you're finding a pathway on your own.
You succeed in spite of or because of? That's the one
Yep.
thing you got to look at with hardships. So
Well,
a little bit, I'd say a little bit of both because
Mm-hmm.
one parent I was more a fan of than the other. So you could say I was rebellious one way and
Yep, the other way. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I could probably guess this one. Fast paced or consistently slow?
I tried running the Twin Cities Marathon in 2013 and I trained for it for 6 months. And it's funny is athletically, I'm technically fast twitch, but I'm the slowest fast twitch guy you've ever seen. No, I was a pretty good sprinter. I could actually, get, the 100 and the 100. I was actually pretty good for a big guy. I could also grab the rim and dunk tennis balls as a senior. So I've got the fast twitch, but I am not, when it comes to running, I'm definitely slow paced. When it comes to life itself, I'm probably very fast paced because right now that preview guide that I'm working on, that's 330 names. I got to keep adding more data to, and I've got to get that done in a week while announcing the Division III tournament at some point this week. So
Yep,
I've got to do things fast.
definitely. Would you consider yourself a mental or a physical athlete?
To be quite honest with you, I was probably not the most mentally tough when it came to the sport of wrestling. It was, while it teaches you some things, I quit a lot. So physically, I felt like, pushing myself with that marathon, for example, like I didn't finish it, which is one thing that drives me nuts. And that wasn't mental. That was physical. I felt like I had the mental capacity to finish that race. I didn't have the physical capacity to. Whereas wrestling, I physically did things I didn't think I could do. And then you get in good shape, you start seeing things. So, that is a difficult question to answer. I would say I'm probably more of a mental athlete than I am a physical one, just based on before I get back into shape.
Okay. Favorite holiday?
NCAA Wrestling Championships.
Hey, you named it right there.
You win.
You win. That's us too. Dan Gable or Cale Sanderson?
Tough call.
You're old school. So that's
I've had a beer with one of them, so that's a plus in the Gable direction. Cale's 2 months older than I am, and we're the same graduating class. And it was the first nationals I went to is when he went 4, so it leans that way. They are both very humorous in their own ways. I'm obviously the Cale's part of my generation, but I know Gable better, so I'd probably have to lean Gable more from the personal relationship than it does to do because I wasn't a wrestling fan when he was in his heyday. He was retiring my senior year in high school, so I didn't get to know Iowa Intense Crazy Dan Gable.
Right.
I know Dan Gable, the goofy grandfather who loves to go fishing, and you spend 8 hours next to him on a movie set. And hearing him and Randy Lewis go back and forth telling stories, it's just, I've spent a lot more time with Gable than I have Cale. So I'd probably lean Gable when it comes to the personal relationship. When it comes to wrestling, when Cale came back in 2011, it was just like, it was just so awesome to see him wrestle again. Cause I caught the tail end of his college career in person, and I covered the World Championships in 2003. I remember watching him win in 2004 at a house party in Newport News, Virginia, and it was but to see it in person and to have that access to be close and just to kind of see it, and to see him wrestle the World Championships that year, it's just there's something special about that guy when it comes to him being on the mat that he is our guy of our generation. The young, guys a little younger now have Burrows. But for us, it was Cale. So I'm leaning Cale as the wrestler, Gable as the relationship.
Favorite number?
12.
Is it a football quarterback?
Well, oddly, we have this thing with 12 in college, and it was just weird because I'd always come up with some stuff about it's the most frequently occurring non-prime number in the universe. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds cool. But also, when I was getting into sports, like prior to up through Super Bowl 22, I want to say. The most winning number of any Super Bowl quarterback was number 12. No, it wasn't just Bradshaw. Look at all the number 12s that won Super Bowls.
Okay.
So And then, yeah, there happened to be a number 12 that won for my Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year, which, as a diehard Bucs fan, the pennant behind me indicates I am no front runner. I've had that Buccaneers stuff for. I had a Vinny Testaverde jersey I grew out of 25 years ago. That ought to tell you something.
That's pretty good.
Threw 35 picks as a best wrestler you ever. It would probably be Andre Elliott. He was the first guy I ever wrestled. He was the most accomplished guy I ever wrestled. Now that doesn't count people I've wrestled in like the bar or
the Bison Turf.
Yeah, no. I mean, Lauren Louise did double leg me outside the Bison Turf one year, and we found out we had the same birthday, and we're like, well, do we just become best friends? So Andre Elliott was the guy who came to the tournament looking for me. He was a single A, I think he was a runner up in third. I don't know if he was a state champion from the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and he was by far he was the fastest guy. Now, Emil Cochet was my drill partner. He was a state runner-up, and he is the best person I knew. But there wasn't a whole lot of matches in there that I can really compare because I had a bouncer from Crazy Charlie's beat me in an intramural tournament, and he was I did pummel with Jake Clark, if that counts. I did wrestle. Went to a Storm Greco practice for some reason. A couple years ago and pummeled with a Greco guy, JK, who was wrestling at the Worlds for Micronesia, and Jake Clark. So I did a little light drilling with Jake Clark, and I did do some pummeling drills with Steve Frazier, although we didn't actually wrestle. I went in the room one day. He's like, Jay, take your shoes off. Let's pummel some. And I'm sitting here pummeling with Steve Frazier, and just like the boom, boom. And I'm like, so I didn't actually wrestle Steve Frazier, but for the purposes of the actual match, it's Andre Elliott. For the best person I've ever worked out with, I worked out with 84 Olympic champ Steve Frazier. Eat it.
There we go.
I've never even thought about that question before. Wow, that's a pretty good answer now that I think about it.
Yeah. And then here's another one. Any habit you learned in wrestling that you still do today?
I will turn this back around on you a little bit. There's a habit I got into wrestling that I don't do today, and that is dip. And that is, I've been very open about my fight on smokeless tobacco. And, wrestling, it was something that when you're from a small little, well, for lack of a better term, a redneck town like I was, you're packing a chew, you're doing a whole popping thing, hey, where's you feed the bear, you make sure the Kodiak bear gets a little indentation in, or you learn how to, pop a can, do a can of Coke, snuff with one hand. It was something that I unfortunately discovered it through wrestling because we're not going to put anything in our lungs because that's endurance. You spit, you lose weight, and unfortunately, far too many people get addicted to Coke, Kodiak, or I was on a can and a half a day at Grizzly, and the only reason it was that is because it was cheap. And I've quit. I've been 5 years. My youngest daughter. It's almost 5 years. I quit July 5th, 2016. She was born July 8th, 2016. And at $7.50 a can in the state of Minnesota, it would be the point where I would be I'm in Fargo, it's $2 a go. I'd get a log or 3 and take them home. So I implore, and because as a broadcaster, you don't want your face to rot off. It's the worst thing I could actually have done for my career. I mean, my voice and my voice is insured. I mean, if something happens, that's how I make my living. So that is the stupidest thing I could have ever done. And yeah, I get it. And you're young and stupid, but I was sitting there looking back at it and I was like, wow, I chewed from 19. Now I quit for stages at a time, but it got to the point where I thought about how much money and I didn't want my daughters to know, what's a chew, having to hide it, and you spill a bottle of spitter over and it's disgusting. I mean, it's just like, so I've used coffee, these grinds. I went through Fargo without a chew. I used to go, I was just rifle through it. Events were worse, especially when you weren't announcing. It was just like, these long days, you got to do something. So ultimately it'll be 5 years in July. And that's something that sadly I was introduced to through wrestling. And I'm glad that I quit it. And I if anybody needs any type of help on what's some strategies, Gabby Musalam was a national, I believe he was a national champ from Missouri Valley, if I'm not mistaken. In the Ncaa, I saw him this past weekend. He shouted at me from the stands. He goes, "Hey JB, 2 years." And it's one of those things. There's There's ways to quit, and it's one of the things, the proudest things I'm happy to have quit. And those cravings suck. They do. I haven't had a cigarette in over 10 years. I haven't had a chew in almost 5. So it's, it's something that I get it. Your social things, whatever. Just, it's time to quit. You're literally spitting money in a bottle. And when I realized that I was spending thousands of dollars a year and getting nothing back on it, heck, I've put that money into an investment account. Acorns. You do that. I'm putting the amount of money I would have spent on a can of chew per week into an account, and in a couple of years, that number's approaching 5 figures when you think about it with the investment. So, just think about what you could do with that money that you're spending.
Definitely. Well,
public service announcement time.
No, that's perfect. No, now the last thing I want to get into is how do we get your media guide for the NCAA Division I? Bill brought this to me, and I said, "This is amazing." And so, tell everybody how we can get that.
All right.
And Bill did. I do have a screen share. So I'm going to add to the screen here.
Well, tell us about the media guide, right? Tell us everything that's in there. I mean, not everything, but why we get it.
So, actually, if I can do a screen share, I could give you a brief tour of a previous version. Let me pull up one.
Probably have one also, but you could maybe do one yourself.
Let me remove a couple things on my side.
Let me see if I can find the 20. Let's see if I can find.
I've got 2019 right here.
Let's bring up 2019 because 2020 still has a lot of stuff that I'm giving away this year. So
let's see here.
Bring it up.
Where did it go? I just had it here.
First things first. It's WrestlingPreviewGuide.com is the most direct way to get it. Now, if you go check out and you use the offer code Dakota, that'll save you $5, and it will also kick these guys back $5 for any, for basically a nice little fundraiser. So Dakota Grappler. So in this thing, you go WrestlingPreviewGuide.com.
Then Preview Guide, is that right?
WrestlingPreviewGuide.com. Yes.
There we go, guys. Right there. I've got it on the bottom.
Yep. And then when you check out, just username or offer code Dakota. You guys know how to spell it. I'm not going to make it too elaborate, but that's how you get it. So it is okay. So here's let's go. Let's just start with the table of contents. So page 3. This is really what you need to see. This is everything that's in this thing. So it's the season's worth of information. Your returning name. Oh, how many All-Americans are coming back? We've got that in there. You go and all those links. This is designed for your tablet. So if you've got an iPad, it's also an interactive PDF. So if you're a lot of you aren't going to be able to make it this year. So you have this on your screen. You click those links. It'll take you to where you need to be. You can read it on your phone. If you've got an iPad, you've got an Android. These links are all clickable, and it tells you where they go. So right there, boom. Hey, look, what state has the most national champions from the home state? So right there, you got North Dakota. There's 2 right there. So it tells you where these type of records.
Troy Steiner.
This whole book will win you so many bar bets because you'll have the information right at your feet. Now, if you go in the back half is really the front half is mostly historical and current season stats, qualifier information. But this is as of a couple years ago, the number of 4-time All-Americans they're placed. But when you get to the back half, let's see. Yeah, this is one thing I like too. That stat right there. Oh, well, how many times has there been 10? I have also now had to change the terminology from All-Americans to place winners because 2020's wrestlers were All-Americans, but they weren't place winners. So now we have to say I was got a threat to have 10 All-Americans this year. Well, yeah, but technically it's place winners. So let's go to our box here. You got it up on the screen. So this is the juicy stuff here. ESPN uses this. Their production truck has it. Every one of their sideline broadcasters at the NCAA championships use it. So right there, you want to know everything you know about Nick Piccinini. You know how to say his name. You can say, hey, look, he placed 4th at 125 pounds and 20. He's from this place. He was first in the Big 12. He's 13-0 against wrestlers. This is his 3rd NCAA tournament. He's 30-0. He's a junior. Here's every single one of his bouts, the result, their opponent, the date, and the type. Every single wrestler, 330 wrestlers at your fingertips. Now, I realize there's websites out there that you can get a lot of this information from, but you cannot get it all in this one place. To get all of Jack Mueller's information, you would have had to go to virginiasports.com to look up where he was from. You can't get all this biographical information and history and statistics. And I even give some photographers some run there. Richard Immel, Mark Lundy, Tony Rotundo get a lot of cool photos in there. You get the top seed. I've keep adding things to this thing, and it's become it's really something I look forward to, even though it's a brutal thing to put together, because the qualifiers came out today. I have to get 330 bios written, 217 pages done in a week. Now, a lot of the stuff I've gotten done in advance, but there's also statistical leaders for your fantasy contests. So if you want to know who's got the most falls, who's got the most bonus point victories, there's a fantasy section in there. If you've got pick'ems, I got one tip that says never pick the place winners to finish seeded 1 through 8 to finish 1 through 8. It's never happened ever. So think about that. How many 10 weight classes a year times how many almost 100 years never happened. 1, 2, 3, back in the day, 1, 2, 3, 4, when there's less 4 seeds, okay, that's happened. But 1 through 8 has never happened. So it's one of those things they've got. There we go. This is one of my favorite sections of the book, because while I work for the Ncaa, I can't exactly market it as a fantasy preview or fantasy whatever, but I have to usually say pick 'em. So right there, first note, yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of what's in the preview guide. Stats, facts, figures. There's stuff in here that I am the only one on the history of the earth that is compiled. And the only way to get it is wrestlingpreviewguide.com and use that promo code Dakota to save yourself $5. So that is how you get all the stuff. Like they're right there, the unseeded. How many times has there been an unseeded guy not placed, or you've got 2 unseeded All-Americans since then. We got all sorts of stuff in there. There's so much information, and I keep adding stuff to it. So
yeah, it's awesome. I mean, check this out: multiple-time unseeded All-Americans. Who in the? I wouldn't even have thought of that stat. It's a great stat.
Connor Utsi's the reason I looked it up, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. This guy did it, because it was the year after. I'm like, well, if somebody asked me, like, hey, how many times has an unseeded guy placed more than once? I'm like, and there were 2 of them that jumped out at me. It was Utsi and it was Mario Stewart. I'm like, because I was at 04, because as a freshman, Mario Stewart was unseeded and was like under 500 and placed. And then he didn't make it back to the tournament. He didn't place again until his senior year. It's like, wait a minute. So that stat, usually every year somebody asks me a question that I don't have an answer to, and it causes me to go back and add a section to the book. So again, this seating, this is the geekery that I do. It just lays it out, and it's now we don't have any. I call this one remembering the unseeded, because there's no more unseeded wrestlers.
There's no more unseeded. Yeah.
So which teams had the most? I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that you've never even thought about asking a question. I've got in here, and you know what? It's only going to get bigger. It's 217 pages right now. It's those are the kids with full seasons. Like if you're making your fantasy pick, Colston's DeBlasio, you need a late pick at 165. Well, DeBlasio had 17 falls. He might get you one on the backside that might help you. Those are the type of things from a fantasy wrestling perspective when you make your little pick'em contest. This type of stuff, people will pay for it. I hope. Yeah. So
absolutely.
There's your tour.
Well, that is pretty awesome. I was amazed. I do a book every year myself, and it's just a preview of the North Dakota wrestling. And I've always thought of just doing a digital version, because what costs me the most is the printing.
Yeah. Well, ESPN actually, they've got to the point where they will pay me to print up 20 copies. The only hard copies that are in existence, ESPN goes, okay, how many books, JB, how many books do you, we need 25. So I will have them ready to go. I will send them to Kinko's really close to a venue. I will go pick them up. They'll be coil bound. I keep, I give them 20. I pay for 5. I pay for my own to have a couple of them, because a couple people I will give. Some people want, I give one to the Hall of Fame for archive purposes. So and I've got a Fargo Almanac too, fargoalmanac.com. It's got every place winner from Fargo, or the USA Wrestling Cadet and 16 year, whatever they want to call it now. Every placement there. So I got all facts and stats there. So that's another digital product that I have. But yeah, that preview guide is, and it's gotten to the point where I really wish more people knew about it, because as much as I've now put it on my weather tweets every morning, but 15,000 followers on Twitter. Somebody buy the damn book. No. And and if you're a patron on mattuckonline.com/join the team, and you're actually a team member, you're going to get that. Bill, you know what I'm talking about. You have been contributing to the network for years. You get these. as part of it. It's like
I can't imagine being at either in the venue or at home trying to watch that tournament without having this, on my iPad. I mean, it's just so awesome to have, and not to mention, the fantasy wrestling stuff. But
last year I was questioning, do I finish it last year? But I'd already had it done. I'm like, so I did it as a yearbook, and I asked people, if you want a refund, I'll refund you. And then some people after the fact are like, you still charge for it? I'm like, well, I emailed you. So this year though, I did put this out there. If there, for some reason something happens in the next 2 weeks and it doesn't come and there's no event, you're gonna get your money back. So, but it's something that's gotten the point. It's simply called The Guide. It's Sparks raves about it. It's like, I tell you, Bryant, I don't save a whole lot of stuff, but I save that book every year.
That's pretty good.
It's right next to my case of Mountain Dew. So.
And pins.
Did you see Bryant at the NCAA get slapped before the finals?
Oh, it was hilarious.
Sparks, yeah.
Sparks, I mean, it was Sparks, yeah.
Dude, I would not have let Jim slap me that hard.
It was pretty good.
Jim sent me that beforehand. I had to keep it under my hat. I'm like, oh, that is good. I fell out of my chair laughing because Shane just deadpans is just like, just like gets so into it. It was great.
Yeah, Makowski told me that Sparks told him that he was pretty sure he got a concussion. They had to do 3 takes of that. He said he wasn't sure at which take he got the concussion on. But
oh my goodness.
That's pretty good.
No,
pretty
it's
good
a small
stuff,
world. I tell you what, you bring wrestling promoting to the next level. It's always pretty cool talking to guys like you. Just keep doing what you're doing. I enjoy it, and I'm hoping more and more people do. That's kind of my goal, is to promote the sport. And same with Bill. So,
and same thing for you folks out here in North Dakota. You don't know how good you got it when you got people like John and Bill doing the Dakota Grappler stuff, because I've been in that. I was in that position with Matt Talk Online back when it was a Virginia site, just trying to get the word out, and people will go back and be like, man, you remember Matt Talk back in the day? Results from like 98 to 07 or there really when I was the heyday. We go back and look through and be like, dude, you remember that? Dude, Nate, dude, you were in a bracket with holy crap. Do you remember this guy? You don't know how, we're spoiled here in Minnesota with the guillotine, and they've done such a great job with wrestling here. And, you got to understand what John and Bill do. And I've known about the Dakota Grappler long before I even moved to a border state. It's been around. You got to support what these guys are doing. And then, no, this is not paid promotion by any means. It was the book that was paid promotion, but that's what you got. And, you appreciate it, because one of these days, those resources that we have aren't going to be there. So, let's make sure that we tell them thank you. And whether if you're watching from a different state and you've got something like that, or if you're, support the people that are supporting the kids. That's the important thing. It's because it's not about, I never did it.
No.
Matt Talk for me. It was my name on it. I was proud of it, but it was because I wanted to promote the sport of wrestling. I wanted to do the peninsula area right. I wanted to be able to get results in the paper for kids and get wrestling more coverage. That's why I did it. And it became a career. So just don't take these guys for granted, folks.
Yeah, definitely. My last shout out is going to be for all the North Dakota wrestlers that qualified. We got 3 this year. I was doing some research. We've had up to 4 or 5 qualified before in the past. People don't know that. But in the early 90s, but the 3, Jared Franick, NDSU, of course, was in the finals of the Big 12. And then we, of course, got, let me think of a wall.
Brandon Metz.
Brandon Metz, NDSU, also wrestled real well, beat the number 2 seed twice to qualify. And then, of course, we have Berwick out of Wisconsin going there, who actually, when you think about it, these guys had a tough road to get there. And
what school did Berwick go to? I don't have enough time.
Wisconsin.
No, I mean high school.
Henninger. Henninger High School.
Yeah,
it's just a small little town.
Where's that? Okay, I guarantee you I haven't
Class
driven
B
through
town
that.
in the southwest part of the state. Yep.
Okay,
Kyle
it
was
is
a five-time state champ for Henninger.
Well, so that's because
he's
I remember
he's
driving through
400 miles from Fargo.
Yikes! Yeah. Well, it's funny because my buddy wrestled at Dickinson back in the day, and he's like, I was like, well. It's like, come on, you and Zadok were neighbors, and Zadok's from Great Falls, Montana. That's
yeah, right.
So yeah, and I remember when I moved out here, they're like, "Hey, JB, what's the next biggest city west of the Twin Cities?" And I'm like, Seattle. But yeah, I didn't know that about Berwick in terms of where that was, because I've driven through a lot of North Dakota, but not all the way through it. I would cut up. I think I picked up at like Buffalo out there coming to Fargo from Colorado one year. I'm like, okay, I've gone through South Dakota, now up and over. I will say driving through South Dakota is a lot prettier than I thought it would be. I never realized it until I'm coming through, and I was like, wow, this is I see where all the duck hunters go, and then I get gas in Aberdeen, and I'm like, okay, I can say I've been to Northern State. And, so
okay,
that's what I got.
And Bill, any last words?
Jason, just clarify for everybody where we can find you at Twitter and obviously the website.
Website's matttalkonline.com. That's where you can get pretty much the entire arsenal of podcasts. I'm very, very active on Twitter at Jason M. Bryant. It's M as in Matthew, which is my middle name. It's not meaning for something else. I'm also at Matt Talk Online for news tweets mainly, and I've got a daily wrestling newsletter that is I curate each and every night for free. And so you wake up in the morning, you get that email, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. The reason it is because there's a dog sled guy out in Colorado that wanted to get it before he took the dogs out sledding, and he leaves at like 5:30. So I was like, all right, well, nobody else has asked me, and I can't exactly time it just for him. So I would go 7, 6, 5. Okay, that works. So California, you're getting it at 4 a.m., but 7 o'clock Eastern, you get the day's news. It's an agnostic look at wrestling. There's stories from all the major websites. I don't play favorites there. Newspapers from around the world. The Indian stuff is always fun to watch because there's always a lot of drama with Indian wrestling, with what's going on over there. But MattTalkOnline.com, where you find me. I'm Jason M. Bryant on Instagram and on Twitter. I've also got at MattTalkOnline pretty much anywhere. I don't do the TikTok because I'm too old for that crap right now. I might need to evolve with the times. I'm just trying to figure out this darned AOL.
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, I'm just happy Jason came on. We got a couple more big weeks of, oh man, we're just actually getting rolling, right? We got NCAA Division II this weekend. We got NWCA Division III, NAI Women's National Championship in Jamestown, North Dakota this weekend, and then next week we get the big show, right? Jason's favorite holiday.
Yeah, then we're off.
NCAA D1s and. Yep, off for a whole couple of weeks before Olympic trials.
It's a week.
It's a week. Are you doing?
Yep, I'm doing.
Are you announcing Olympic trials?
Yes, I am doing the trials. So that'll be the second time I announce the trials. I've been at every trial since 2004. So
yeah, well, it's an awesome tournament. I'm not going this year. But I was at the last one.
Concentrated excellence.
It's unbelievable.
Everybody in there is a beast. So
yeah, they're all hammers. They're just. Yep, they're all killers. So that'll be a lot of fun too. And then I guess we'll get a little bit of a break until the Olympics. But
fingers crossed, that's for sure.
and so that's it. Yeah, I'm just really happy to have you on here tonight. It's great to talk wrestling. Great to hear your story. I just would like for more people to see what you do and hear what you do, and get the enjoyment I get out of it all the time. So
I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jason. And guys out there, Dakota Grappler, we'll catch you again very soon. Talk to you later.